the difference between 3 rocks and many rocks. It's 3 or 5. You choose which one you do. If you do raw V-trigger, it's 3. If you do down plus V-trigger, it's 5. Basically, 3 rocks gives you each time you press a normal, it uses less of your meter, so you can get more uses of the rocks. Whereas the 5 rocks, each button press uses more of the meters, but it lets you do more consistent combo routes and more higher damaging combo routes, because basically you get more hit stun per button because there's more rocks that hit later and later, and you can get different routes. So the strategy for me, I've been trying to mix in more 3-stone. 5-stone is great if you get a guaranteed hit. You get great combo routes. 3-stone is better if you just are activating in a raw situation and don't have an advantage, and you just want to control neutral for longer. Use 3-stone. What games are you competing level in? Street Fighter 5. I was in Street Fighter 4. People always love to shit talk on random VODs and videos on YouTube, like, oh, where were these guys in Street Fighter 4? Man, I wish I wasn't a broke college kid in Street Fighter 4 days. I would have beat their asses at any tournament. It's wild, the shit that people make up. The cognitive dissonance that happens when you become an old FGC boomer is ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's wild. I was nice in Street Fighter 4. I was nice. Yeah, my Yun was trash. My Yun was definitely trash. But I just mess with a lot of characters in 4. The amount of times I've been told you're not a real Street Fighter player in the comments is amazing. I mean, I'm just hoping that eventually the retirement homes just disable their Wi-Fi, and then we can all be free to enjoy the game. I love how people say I grew up playing fighting games when in reality they either spammed Hadokens with a friend, sibling, or only played arcade mode in arcades. Yeah, usually, like, if you tell me you grew up playing fighting games, it's usually an indicator that you're probably awful at playing fighting games. Unless you're like the 1%, the 0.001%, like the Justin Wongs, the Alex Vai's, you know what I'm saying? Like, the number of people who played fighting games back in the day and actually knew what the hell was going on was so few, but the number of people who played Street Fighter 2 is massive. There's so many people who have played fighting games casually, and that's all they just know about the button mashing, the aesthetics, and the fun part of it, which is fine. But usually it's a good indication that if you say, oh, you grew up playing fighting games, it usually means more often than not that you're bad at them. Whereas someone who's discovered fighting games in the modern era knows the competitive side about it. Like, people didn't even know that you can compete in video games back then. So if you're young and you say, oh, I just found out about Street Fighter, odds are you're going to be a better fighting game player faster. Way faster, because you have all these resources. You can see people playing the game at a competitive level. Like, it's so much easier these days to like be like, oh, people get good at this game. It's not just spamming moves without thinking. I can actually form strategies. Oh, I have something to emulate. It's so easy to start picking stuff up like that. Right. Most people did not have an active arcade scene. So most people just played Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo. That's most people. Now, there's like a small percentage of people who actually had a competitive arcade scene. And then, you know, they learned how to play. And they're mad nice. That's like the Justin Wongs, the Vai's, all the old school, like, hardcore FGC guys. They're obviously really good. But there's a huge percentage of the population who just played for fun. Which is fine. It's just, you know, I think these days with the prevalence of esports and everything, everyone knows that there's a competitive side to games. So if you find out about a game now and you're younger, like, odds are you're going to be more competitively inclined, or at least understand the competitive side a little bit. I legit only played Street Fighter 2 when they happened to see it at the local pizza joint. Yeah, that was me. There was this sports bar when I used to grow up called Keg South, and they had, you know, it was like wings and whatever, jalapeno poppers, and they had a few arcade machines by the pool tables, and I used to play Street Fighter 2. No idea what I was doing. They also had like a Tekken 2 or 3 arcade cab, which I would look at those button combos and be like, wow, because the cab itself would have on it some sample combos and strings for you to do with the characters with the motion inputs, and I'd be like, what? So I would alternate between Street Fighter, Tekken, and what was like the most famous arcade racing game from the 90s like that.
So Mylan's the player one, so you all know. And
You know the one that has like the desert stage with the crowd, like the 2D girls like doing this. Yeah, I think it was Daytona USA.
Mylan tried to chase.
It was it Cruisin' USA?
Chase faster. Holy, it's a total reversal.
But it was in the arcade.
You like cheeks? That's what that was. You like cheeks? 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think it was Cruisin' USA.
DM stands for mix-up.
What's it called when you got into fighting games because of the pandemic? A 19er? Usually the generations don't start until a Street Fighter game, but to be honest, like, there's no real definitive term for Street Fighter 5 players. 09 and prior, 09 and after, and 09 and prior is such a paradigm shift that it deserved its own, like, label, like a generation. Even Street Fighter 5 players are not even really called 16ers. It doesn't really exist. But the generation before 09 and the generation after 09 are so fundamentally different, and there's such a large number of them that it made sense to have a label, and there's a reason why like everyone agrees on that label. There's not really going to be enough people who started playing fighting games during the pandemic. But I would also assume that a lot of the people who picked up fighting games during the pandemic are like the people who watch YouTube videos and shit. It's like the content era players.
Oh my goodness, everything from Island's hitting now.
Right? It's like the era players that got into stuff because of the individual content creators rather than the competitive circuit.
Here she comes. No, it missed.
The offline scene, which I think is an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, so I applied directly to them, Soul Fracture, and so far they've told me that we should continue as we are and that not make any changes, and they'll let us know if we got to change anything. So.
Interesting. Spooky mentioned, someone in the chat asked about the Capcom tournament agreement or tournament license agreement, whatever the thing it's called that everyone's pissed off about Capcom talking about having like payout limits for where you would then, if you go over the limit, be required to get an esports license and things like that. Spooky said he applied and that the Cap Cops just told him to do what he's been doing with no changes. Like, don't worry about it. He said that they told him if anything changed, they would let him know, but just keep doing your thing. That kind of goes in mind with what I was thinking. I really do feel like that agreement is like some legal mumbo jumbo to make sure they don't lose IP rights. Like, there's some legal bullshit where like if you don't show that you're proactively protecting your IP and just letting everyone just copy your logos and like making it practically turning it to public domain by not trying to enforce some control around it, you can lose your IP. So I really feel like that license agreement is like just a thing for one, to enforce IP rights, and two, if there's ever giant events like Evo size, they do want to probably get a cut of that. That's what I'm thinking it's for. I feel like it was just written really poorly in a way where it made everyone who's grassroots feel spooked and insulted. I don't think that was their intent. I honestly feel like it was incompetence. That's my first thought. That's what I'm thinking. That they messed up in the way they wrote it to scare everybody. I don't think that's their intention. I could be wrong, but I don't feel like their intention is to scare people from running tournaments and to take a cut if you go over $2,000 in a weekly. That's my impression. I definitely could be wrong, though. And that kind of is reinforced by what Spooky just said. If he got in contact with them and they told him to just keep running the tournament as usual, you know, these match arenas, they go over $2,000 all the time. Maybe not this one. This one's only at 196, but also, you know, it was a $2,000 per event or 10,000 per week or something, or 10,000 per year or month, which is way too low. NLBC definitely goes over that. They told him to not worry about it. 10K a year? That's nothing. That's 1 week. With all the NLBCs that Spooky does that sometimes pop off like that. That's nothing. So by that language, Spooky would definitely have to apply for an esports license. And that's the part that's hidden behind like the communication barrier. We don't know what that means. What is an esports license? That might mean like, hey, you have to give us a percentage of your profit or pay us a fee, or who knows what that means, right? But apparently Spooky said they told him, don't worry about it, just keep doing your thing. So that to me makes me think that that's not the intention of this thing that they're writing.
Done. Damn,
do your coworkers know that you're a big dog in the FGC? I don't think I'm a big dog in the FGC, but then I think back and I guess I realize that maybe I am, compared to where I was before and what I used to consider big dogs before. That's always a weird thing. I don't think you realize the change in position and change in perception as it happens to you at all.
What the heck?
You definitely don't realize it. But my coworkers, not really. They know there's some gaming thing going on, but they don't really understand it. And that's how I'd like to keep it. That's not imposter syndrome. I'm just saying it's one of those things, just like positive criticism doesn't stick like negative criticism. It's just the way your brain works.
Great offensive play right now. And Shox is certainly on the back foot for most of this round so far. Even with the
but then when I think about it, like if I look at my Twitter account, I have like, I'm getting close to 30K followers on Twitter, which is wild. But then I think about like, if I looked at a different account with that many followers back in the day, I would be like, oh, this dude's fucking huge in the FGC.
Very close round.
Right? And I don't feel that way. Nothing has changed. I've been doing the same shit I've been doing. Just with more platforms, I guess, getting on like the CPT thing. But I feel like day to day, I'm doing the same exact thing I was doing before. I'm playing the game and I'm streaming.
Can't miss those toxins.
Like nothing has changed to me. So it's just a weird thing. And I think that probably happens to a lot of people as they grow in a space. Because I used to look up to people who were at similar, I guess, presence or like visibility before. And then I was like, I had to remind myself, like, hey, I'm kind of in that spot now.
That's a good mix-up, don't get me wrong. But
you know, it reminds you there's responsibility associated with that too.
Like I would say that Shox is almost getting completed pills. Nice escape. Need this. Now what?
You co-hosted the season final. It's a pretty big difference. See, even that. Oh no, Joe.
Are you for real? What the heck?
Oh no, Joe.
I don't know if that was meant to confirm.
The season finals thing still hasn't even sunk in. Like, you get what I mean? Like, it just never hits you.
That was weird. Shox takes advantage.